Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's show, I wanted to focus on Greenland and more specifically President Donald Trump's fervent push towards the acquisition of Greenland. There's been a lot of speculation in the news and a lot of saber rattling on the side of the Americans as to whether they would or wouldn't take Greenland. And there are a lot of things that are being done behind the scenes. A lot of it may also be optics. So during this show, I wanted to take the opportunity to give you my view on what I think is driving the American Greenland push, as well as the chances of it actually happening and Greenland becoming a part of the United States or not, as well as the European reactions and what Europe can or can't do regarding this issue. So, right at the beginning, I want to state that Donald Trump will have Greenland one way or another.
I'm a fan of Denmark too, I have to tell you, and they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also, but we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way.
I think it's a foregone conclusion, it's an inevitability, and it's something we've seen him press forward. We know that there is precedence in this where earlier on in history, American history, presidents did talk of acquiring Greenland. I know that Alaska was purchased. I think parts of Mexico as well were purchased and added to the United States. So certainly there is precedent. But one thing I would like to make clear is that Trump will take Greenland one way or another. And one of the reasons I think he will do that is he's continuously cited containing China and Russia. Now, let's look at Russia for a minute. If you go back to the first Trump presidency, if you remember the run-up to the presidency, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats came out guns blazing together with 52 CIA officials and directors all saying that there's Russian collusion to help Trump win the election and, Russia Gate and all that. So you've got that to bear in mind. However, you will understand or you will remember that during Trump's first presidency, Russia didn't play as important a role as, let's say, the Democrats hoped it would. Trump, I firmly believe, doesn't see Russia as a threat, or certainly as much of a bigger threat to the United States as he does see China. If you remember, everything about the Trump administration's first term in office was China, China, and containing China. So after the Trump first term presidency, you had Joe Biden come into power. And the notable thing that happened was that China went onto the back burner and Russia became the new boogeyman. And the consequences of that were, I believe, the Americans together with Britain and all their NATO allies baiting Vladimir Putin regarding Ukraine and getting him to invade Ukraine. China was conveniently moved over and all focus was on events in Ukraine. Trump is also acutely aware that Denmark, together with Greenland, pose absolutely no threat militarily to the United States. Let's be frank. All of NATO, including the United Kingdom, cannot stand up to American military might. This is clearly evident from everything you see that has gone on in the last 4 years. NATO, together with American might behind them and other powers, have barely been able to contain the Russians. So much so that Russian control of Ukrainian land accounts for probably over 20% now. The Russian economy, despite all the sanctions and everything that's been thrown at it, still moves ahead. It's actually probably in a better position than most European economies today, comparatively. So Trump is acutely aware that NATO cannot stand up to him. And you have to also understand that if he cites Greenland as being coming under threat by or from the Chinese and the Russians, he's effectively saying that he has no faith in the European countries and NATO to be able to patrol the area around Greenland and secure it. So I think the writing is definitely on the wall. Now, just pivoting to the operation in Venezuela, I think Venezuela was a bit of a test case because Donald Trump exacted a regime change in Venezuela, a very public display of American might, despite whatever happened behind and whoever sold Nicolas Maduro out and the amount of money that changed hands. Optically, the Americans conducted a very brazen attack on Venezuela, which involved in the regime change and Maduro and his wife being flown to the United States to stand trial. Look at what ensued from the rest of the world following this debacle. Some stern, harsh words from China, Russia, Europe, but that's where it stood. So that is why I believe Venezuela was a test case. So when Trump says he will have Greenland one way or another, he's saying that, or he understands that even if he had to intervene and take Greenland militarily, the best case scenario is that you would get stern condemnation from the rest of the world, but I think that's where it would end. Also, you have to understand that the United Nations at this point it's a joke. They've been unable to stem the war in Ukraine. They've been unable to act on what has happened in Venezuela. So they're basically, a toothless tiger, being given a lot of credit and being given a lot of fanfare that frankly I think is unjustified. I think they're just there, to make everybody feel good about themselves, and that's about it. Because the United Nations can do absolutely nothing. They're an impotent organization that has far outlasted its relativity in the world. This operation that the Americans carried out in Venezuela actually goes on to show the world that we've now moved from a covert world where might equals right into a very overt and in-your-face world of might equals right. If you have the power and the capability, then that is all that matters. This is the first time in a long time that you're seeing American expansionism, and you're seeing American expansionism on steroids. The myth of the world following a global order and it being one happy global family and everybody, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, I think that myth has severely been shattered. And I think it will take a even harsher beating should the Americans take Greenland by force. So recently, we've seen increased troop presence in Greenland. I know the Danes have sent a contingent of troops down to Greenland, and European powers are committing to sending troops down as well, ostensibly for military drills that are being performed in the area. That's all nonsense. This is Europe scrambling. They're afraid. They're worried that a US invasion of Greenland is imminent. And this is them showing you their 2 cents worth and saying, we're prepared to stand up. Let's just be honest. If the Americans show up in Greenland and they want to take it by force, there is absolutely nothing that Europe can do. Europe currently is impotent. They live on the fantasy of the old days of where Europe was, when Europe was actually a force to contend with. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Europe has cannibalized itself with sick policies that have gone on only to weaken it from within. You know, their military, their social policies. The continent of Europe is impotent. And I'm referring primarily here to the Western European countries that have embraced all these ideologies that of recent times that have resulted in them just spiraling down a path, spiraling down a descent into madness. I Trump is acutely aware that if the Americans land in Greenland and want to take it by force, then all this posturing by Europe amounts to nothing. They've been unable to stem the Russian advance in Ukraine. How on earth are they going to manage to stem an advance by the most powerful military currently on the planet? I don't understand. So that is a given, that if America wants to take Greenland by force, it will happen. I have no doubt about that. So Greenland will become part of the United States in one of a few ways. Either the Americans will buy them off. They've made an offer. The other option is militarily they will go in, or Donald Trump is assassinated before his term ends and somebody else comes in. However, I think that his push for Greenland has cemented something within the American psyche that even subsequent presidents will be able to move ahead on, or will push on, because I think that it's at a point where the Americans realistically see that Greenland, unchecked with American might, becomes a threat to the Americans in terms of the natural resources, the sea lanes that are opening, the trade routes that are opening, the polar ice caps melting. This it's going to create opportunities, and if the Americans feel that if they do not get in on it now, it's going to be too late. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, Europe has become impotent in terms of what it can and can't do in Ukraine. So Trump has zero faith in them being able to patrol the areas around Greenland and the Arctic region and help secure, or ensure security that the Americans think they should have. So that is why I think he's definitely going in and saying he will take Greenland one way or another. You've just had the foreign minister of Greenland and the foreign minister of Denmark have high-level talks with Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. And, for optics, again, you've had the foreign minister of Denmark say that they did have a conversation, and while it was amicable, it was not profitable in any way.
I think it's very important to say it again, that how important it is from our side to strengthen our cooperation with the United States, but that doesn't mean that we want to be owned by the United States.
So the Americans have not budged. They've stated their case, and that is it. Now, there's one thing I'd like to address apart from everything else that I've just said. And that is that I often wonder if Greenland is being touted as this area that needs to be patrolled to provide and needs to be owned to provide security for the United States, or, and this is the big or, because I think that Europe in some way could benefit from everything and all the rhetoric that is going around. At the moment, Trump is saying he's going to take Greenland one way or another. And all the saber rattling is around a military option. This requires Europe to then send or deploy troops to Greenland because they're threatening to secure Greenland and their pledge of security to Greenland. However, the elephant in the room that nobody seems to be discussing is that Europe doesn't have the resources it thinks it has or it wishes it has. They are woefully under-resourced. So if they have to then direct these resources to Greenland, which they now see as an existential threat, then it leaves Ukraine on the back burner. I suspect, again, that if this is indeed true, then I suspect a deal has been done by way of back channeling between the Europeans and the Americans on Ukraine without Zelensky's knowledge. Because, if you hear me out on this, if you remember when the talks at the beginning of the Russian campaign into Ukraine, when they sat down for talks in Istanbul, and those talks were overridden by Boris Johnson, who had made his trip down to Ukraine. Incidentally, I know somebody who was on that, who made that journey with Boris Johnson to Ukraine, and I had got a lot of first-hand knowledge from that person about what was going on. It's rather fascinating. Anyway, I digress. When you look at the Istanbul conference that was held but never amounted to anything, it was hijacked by the British. So the war continued. The problem you have is that if Europe wants to end the war in Ukraine, they have no way out. Because if they came out and said, look, we've lost, the Russians have defeated us, they have egg on their face. And that's where the problem comes in. So this push to Greenland could actually be a deal where they divert their resources to Greenland. Ukraine gets put on the back burner and slowly gets forgotten. The Russians, a deal is done with the Russians where they take everything up to Odessa and the rest of Ukraine is left to fend for itself. So I believe that Trump is providing an out for Europe regarding Ukraine, because the Europeans benefit, the Russians benefit, and the Americans benefit. Trump gets to say that he's ended the war that he was meant to have ended within a day. And it's another feather in his cap. The Nobel Peace Prize, guaranteed Shehbaz Sharif will make sure he gets the Peace Prize this time. So, yeah, it's a win all round except for the Ukrainians. But I think the Ukrainians knew it was never going to be a win for them from the word go, especially when the United States said that, I think it was Lindsey Graham who said that, think about it, it's amazing. We get to fight Ukraine with Ukrainian soldiers and not a single American life is lost.
People ask me, is it worth it? Here's what we've gotten for our investment. We haven't lost one soldier. We've reduced the combat power of the Russian army by 50%. And not one of us has died in that endeavor. This is a great deal for America.
You've previously said that it's the best money we've ever spent. That's still true?
Since we helped Churchill stand up to the Nazis.
Or statements were coming out that we will fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. So, as always, as we all knew, the Ukrainians would be the ones who would lose out in the end. And of course, they've been sold out by their Zelensky government that was siphoning money out. It's just sad what would happen to them. I think also when you look at it from a legacy point of view, Donald Trump is somebody who has a great ego that continuously needs to be pampered and looked after and appealed to. And I think that even if he doesn't go into Greenland, he has started something that 100 years from today, he would be credited as the president who got Greenland. So I really think it's about him also trying to cement his legacy and be remembered as the person that helped secure Greenland. Because with the climate changes happening and shipping lanes opening in the Arctic, the resources that are beneath the ice becoming, that are required and becoming more accessible as the years go by, at a time when all these resources can be harnessed, then at that point in time, people will look to him and say, this was the guy, this was the president who helped us secure it. So he's playing the long game here. He's definitely playing the long game here. But I think for Greenland, it's, I think a worst case scenario is he'll take Greenland militarily. If the people of Greenland are not happy, he'll have them relocated to Denmark, and he'll introduce an American population into Greenland and make Greenland great again. So once again, thank you very much for listening to this podcast and joining me on this journey. And I humbly ask you to please like, share, and subscribe, as it helps our channel grow and it helps us with the algorithm. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.